Quick video today on 12-volt lighting for off-grid cabins. I put 12-volt lighting in this cabin here, and the reasons I did that is because I anticipate being able to run this off battery with a direct connection to my 12-volt distribution block, for lack of a better term. I do have an EcoFlow at the moment running this, so this is running off the power station, and it is 110 volt into a 12-volt power supply. That might not always be the case though. I do have solar on here now. I will be putting a solar charge controller and a battery to run this. The only caveat to that is I do have 110 volt distribution system like plugs in the cabin as well. Those are obviously not going to run off 12 volts. I could do it with an inverter, but I'm probably not going to bother. Really, if I'm going to run the 110 volt stuff, I'll probably have a power station out here to do that. Multiple ways I can connect all of this stuff. Anyway, I'll show you. This is my power distribution board, I guess you call it. There's multiple ways that I'm bringing the power in and how I'm distributing that. Essentially, right now I've got the EcoFlow running and I have a single 110 volt plug into that. That plugs into this guy here, and this runs all the 110 volt that I have running around the cabin. I have 7 electrical boxes, and they're hooked up like your normal household boxes would be, and they look like this. So out of that, this plug actually is plugged into a 12 volt power supply at the moment. This power supply I can disconnect with this switch. I picked these switches up for real cheap off, I think it was Temu actually, and so if I need to disconnect quickly, I can. It's a quick disconnect, but it's a double pole switch. When I have a battery in here, the next step was going to be I'll add another one of these to the battery as a disconnect, so one's not running the other. The reason being, if I just hook the battery straight up to my 12 volt distribution, the power supply will actually run. It runs backwards. Don't ask me why. Not sure why that happened. So essentially what I'm trying to do here is get 12 volts to these guys. And this is obviously a negative, positive, black, red block to wire everything into. And I bring all the wiring in down through here, and each circuit or each thing that I've got has its own separate wiring that goes to wherever it needs to go to for lighting. Vast majority or pretty much all of the 12 volt stuff that I'm showing you is for lighting only. Other wires you see here like this is actually from the solar panel outside, and this wire goes to the controller for the diesel heater. But essentially all of the 12 volt comes into this as a distribution block, and then everything comes out of this and goes back up to where I need it to go. All of the wiring comes into and goes through here. I've got 3 switches. One is for the overhead lights, one is for the, I'll call them living room lights, and one is for another overhead light here, which I'll get to in just a minute. This switch and this switch are actually 3-way switches, and they are wired just like you would wire a normal household 3-way switch for your lights. And I'll show you why I do that. But the difference is I'm not using the regular 14 gauge solid household copper. I went ahead and I used the it's 14 gauge, but it's meant for DC. It's a 12 volt DC wiring, which is this red and black wire. I'm going to be straightforward with you here. You don't have to use this. You could use the regular household stuff. It's fine. In fact, it's probably even better in a lot of cases. It's just going to make it easier when I hook up some of the actual fixtures. But this stuff can be a pain. So because this is not solid wire, this is a stranded wire, so it's much softer and stranded. It's harder to get into the screw terminals where you need to. You can't use the on the back of electrical switches, there's a hole you can just shove wires into. If you want to use that instead of the screw terminals on the side, You can't do that with this stuff. You have to wire it, but it's so soft that it's hard to maneuver. So it is a lot more difficult to do this. Also, shoving it through electrical boxes is a lot more challenging as well. But I think in the end, it worked out well. You'll see the red and black, which is obviously positive, negative for each thing. The middle switch runs this wire here, which is going to be the overhead light. I'll get to in a minute. And then the other switches, like I said, the overhead lights that are already hooked up, and the what I'll call the living room lights is the other circuit that goes. The blue wire you see, if you can see that blue wire that comes out, is the what's the name of it? Traveler wire. And that's for three-way switches. The living room lights, what I call living room lights, are these things, and it's actually just a regular 110 volt, 120 volt fixture. The only difference is that bulb, which screws into a normal E26, I believe it's called, is actually a 12 volt bulb. The wires from that switch come over here for these living room lights, and it goes up. This is another three-way switch. It's a regular household 120 volt three-way switch, but it'll work the same with 12 volt. Just you have to fiddle with the soft wires, the only thing, like I said. And up to my fixture here. So three-way works back here. Concept is when you walk in the cabin, you can flick on the lights, and if you're sitting back here in the living room, when this becomes a living room, whenever that is, you can turn them on and off. You can control them from down here independently. For overhead lights, I've used these. They're surface mount, but they're surface mount is the right term, flush mount kind of deal. But they're very slim. They're very small. They don't take very much wattage either. And so I have 6 of them, 4 over in the main part, and then I'm in the loft part, which is not a loft yet, but I have 2 of them over here. You'll note that I have these wired in with using morettes. That is not a permanent solution. I did that temporarily to get all the lights up and running and to make sure that everything was working the way that I wanted it to work. And I wanted it like that so that I could take it apart when I actually put in the ceiling. There'll be like a tongue groove board ceiling probably, but I want to be able to disconnect the lights and then have a hole through there that I can put the wire through. And then once I've done that, then the wires are going to be connected by connecting them together in a much better fashion using heat shrink tubing and no morettes. They are 12 volts, so that's probably the proper way of doing that. Over here you'll see another 3-way switch, and that is for the overhead lights. And the reason it's way up here high, you probably can't tell, but anyway, it's up high because this is where the ladder steps are going to be to come up in the loft. And the concept there is that you have the lights on, and if you come up to bed, you want to be able to turn the lights off when you get up in the loft. So turns off the lights. I ran another 12 volt circuit up to these. So these are just like little reading lights. This is in the loft here. Windows right here. I have one on either side. You can see that one there. So that's they're just a touch switch. And so little reading lights are just a little bit of light for up here in the loft. Again, that circuit, that's an unswitched circuit for the 12 volt circuit. I'm going to do the same thing where the morettes are a temporary to make sure that this is all working. And but when I do actually put in the insulation and wall, then I'll have a hole coming through, and those will be heat shrinked and connected that way. Those lights also have USB plugs on the bottom of them under here, and that's so if you're up here and you want to charge your phone or whatever you want to do, that's available. I've run all the wires about 4 feet up on the studs, and they are running through the 1/2 inch holes that I've drilled through the studs like that. I have a separate circuit that branches off just down here, and it goes up to the loft where those little lights are. And yeah, so it's pretty straightforward. Again, very similar to household 120 volt lighting, but just using this type of wire instead. I don't know if it was the right call or not, but it seemed to be fine. It is just 12 volts, and these lights only run, you know, they're 3-4 watts each or something like that. So I'm not that concerned about power being too much going through all of these wires at once, but they are DC, not AC. So that was a little bit of consideration, but everything seems to be fine. The final light that I haven't put up yet is this, and this is super interesting. So what this is a cast iron fixture. It's never been electrified. Originally, I believe it was either candles or those little baskets held oil lamps. It came out of the church that was local here that was torn down in the 60s to make way for the highway. It's actually family. It's got family history. It was a family church. And this is a cast iron. It's probably, I'm going to say, 150 years old. So what I've done is I have these other fixtures. They're just sitting there right now. And more of those 12 volt light bulbs, which is what those are. And so that is going to hang up in kind of the middle of the cathedral ceiling here. And that's what's on the middle switch of those 3 switches when you first walk in. Up there is where that candelabra fixture is going to hang. It's going to hang off the middle of there, but obviously I have to get all the insulation. But I have the wire there. The wires, it's not actually hooked up to power, so those aren't live. But I can hook it up very easily on that distribution block. Like I showed you, there's 2 wires that are unhooked, and that's what those are for. The only other real 12 volt thing is the diesel heater itself. Now right now I just have this control. It's just hanging loosely, but it will eventually, switches are there, be mounted to the wall here. One other point I want to make is that I've added that extra plug that you see right there. That is actually connected to a cord that goes outside that's coiled up, and the intent there is that that can plug into a generator. So that'll be the generator plug on the inside, and if I was running on nothing but a generator, I could easily plug straight into that. I can plug the 12 volt power supply into that and run 12 volt off a generator. I can use that generator to charge up a power station. So I just wanted to get all the wiring done out of the way before I start closing up these walls. So the yellow plug is connected to that yellow box, which is connected to the rest of the circuits that go all the way around the cabin. I've got 7 of these boxes with 120 volt plugs. So that right now, and that yellow wire is what's plugged into the power station. So multiple different ways of connecting 12 volts and 120 volts, either through generator, through power station, through battery, charge a power station through a generator, you name it. There's just options of how I can run the power in here, and this makes it a lot simpler when it's all laid out like this. That's pretty much it for the lighting. It's pretty straightforward. It looks pretty straightforward, but it took me a lot longer than I thought it was going to run all of the wiring, make sure that everything was working right, to get this 3-way switch business done. I know it seems excessive for what this is. This is just a little cabin, but the intent is that this is going to be a fairly comfortable cabin, and I might not be the one staying here. In fact, it's probably going to be used by friends and family and other folks. Not going to be an Airbnb, obviously, but uh, it's I wanted it to be very simple, easy, walk in, turn on stuff. I can plug in one plug to a power station and run the whole cabin that I need to run. And yeah, so it might be overkill, uh, but I think the end result will be nice. Now that I've got all my wiring done, my next step here is to insulate, put up vapor barrier, and put up the tongue and groove pine or whatever it is I decide to do on the walls and the ceiling. Then we're getting close to getting done. Can't wait. Anyway, thanks for watching. Hope this was educational or enjoyable, or you get any comments or anything like that, please pop them in there. I try to respond wherever I can. If you see that I did something really bad and I'm in danger of doing something like burning the place down, also let me know. Thanks.